The road to Red Bluff was little more than a scar in the earth, a rutted trail beaten flat by wagon wheels and sun-baked dreams. Dust rose with every footstep, swirling in the air like ghosts too stubborn to rest. The late summer heat clung to the skin, thick and stale, but it was the wind that carried the warning, dry, bitter, and whispering of rain not yet seen. Nora Whitfield trudged into town beneath that restless wind, her faded bonnet limp, her skirt heavy with dirt, and, her arms trembling from the weight of the child on her hip, behind her Tommy, no more than 10 but already stooped with duty, held tightly to his little sister Eliza's hand. The girl's cheeks were streaked with dust, her bare feet cracked and raw. Baby Amos whimpered against Nora's chest. She hushed, him gently, though her lips were parched and her voice no more than a breath. They hadn't eaten since the morning before, dry bread and an apple shared between them. Red Bluff wasn't much. A crooked main street lined with mismatched buildings, a smithy, a mercantile, a church with peeling paint and a saloon with swinging doors half off their hinges. The town looked tired, like it had once hoped for greatness but gave up somewhere along the way. Nora stopped just past the livery, staring ahead like a soldier surveying unfamiliar territory. Her eyes were gray, the kind that held storms of their own. She'd buried a husband last winter and sold what little they had to keep the children fed through spring. But spring had been cruel, and the journey west had been crueler still. She pulled Tommy close. "Stay with me," she murmured. "No matter what." He nodded, jaw clenched like his father's had once been. They passed the sheriff's office. The man inside barely looked up. A shopkeeper noticed her and quickly turned the sign to closed. A woman sweeping her porch paused, eyes narrowing. Murmurs followed. Widow, by the look of her. 3 young'uns. Lord have mercy. Not our problem. Nora approached, the church steps. The wind caught her skirts, fluttering the hem like nervous fingers. She climbed carefully, knocked once, twice. After a long moment, the door creaked open. A thin-faced preacher peered through the crack. "We don't have room," he said before she could speak. "Not for more mouths. Try the boarding house." The door closed. No prayer, no blessing, just the cold sound of rejection. Tommy looked up at her, but she didn't cry. Nora hadn't cried in months. They crossed the street to the boarding house. The landlady stepped out before they reached the porch. "Room's full. No charity here." Nora opened her mouth, but the woman turned her back. A sharp gust kicked up dust around. "Their feet," Eliza coughed. Amos wailed. Tommy wiped his face with a shaking hand. Nora pulled them all close. The sky overhead darkened. Thunder grumbled in the distance. She turned slowly, scanning the town. Only one door remained, the saloon. Its windows were stained amber with years of smoke and silence. Inside, rough laughter drifted out, accompanied by the clink of glasses and the dull thump of boots on floorboards. Nora stepped forward. Tommy tugged at her skirt. "Mama, we can't go in there." She didn't answer. She didn't slow. The saloon doors swung inward with a creak that cut through the room like a knife. Silence. The piano man stopped playing. Cards froze in the hands of men with sunburned necks and calloused fingers. A bottle clinked to the floor. Nora stood just inside the threshold, clutching Amos to her chest, her other hand gripping Eliza's arm. Tommy held her skirt in a white-knuckled grip. She did not speak. She did not plead. She simply stood there, framed by the storm-colored sky and the wind that followed her in like a final warning. Behind the bar, a tall man leaned back slowly. He wore a worn vest over a faded shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. A holstered pistol hung at his side, untouched. Colt Reeves. He had seen blood in his time, enough to stain every night's sleep. He'd buried brothers in Virginia mud, ridden west to outrun the ghosts, and built a saloon not for joy, but for quiet, for forgetting. And yet, something in the widow's eyes made him forget everything else. He reached up slowly. Every eye in the room watched as Colt Reeves removed his hat. His face was unreadable, except for the eyes. eyes that had once watched men die and had stopped believing in mercy. He stepped out from behind the bar. His boots echoed on the wooden floor as he walked toward her, dust swirling in from the biu. Door still swinging behind her, he stopped a few feet away. Nora held her ground. For a long breath, they said nothing. Then, Colt nodded once, slow and certain, and said, "Ma'am, this is home now." A single tear rolled down Eliza's cheek. Tommy's shoulders sagged with relief. Amos fell quiet, sensing the stillness. Nora blinked once. "Thank you," she whispered, and the wind, for just a moment, died down. The back room of Colt Reeves's saloon smelled of whiskey barrels and sawdust. It wasn't meant for sleeping. There was no bed, no stove, and no windows to speak of. Just an old wool blanket spread over a crate, a pile of hay in the corner, and a cracked wash basin near the door. But to Nora Whitfield, it might as well have been a palace. She laid her baby down gently, humming under her breath as the wind howled outside. The storm had finally broken, lashing the saloon with sheets of cold, bitter rain. Thunder cracked like rifle shots across the sky, but the children, exhausted, slept through it. Colt leaned against the door frame, arms folded. He said nothing as Nora tucked Eliza's feet beneath the blanket. Her hands trembled, but she hid it well. "You don't have to stand guard," she said without turning. "I ain't," Colt replied, though he didn't move. The candle between them flickered, casting long shadows on the wall. Rain drummed steady on the roof. Nora finally looked at him. "You expect trouble?" Colt stared at the floorboards. "Always do." The widow and her children had stayed the night. Worse, in Colt's place. The preacher shook his head at the general store, whispering about sin. The landlady at the E.E. boarding house spoke of impropriety, though she'd turned the family away herself. Even the blacksmith muttered, "That boy of hers shouldn't be growing up around drinking men." Colt heard it all. He didn't respond. He never did. He simply poured drinks and watched. Nora, for her part, refused to sit idle. The second morning, she emerged from the back room with her sleeves rolled and her chin set like stone. She scrubbed the bar, swept the floors, mended the torn curtain that had hung crooked for 2 years. She cooked eggs with stale biscuits for Colt and his few early patrons. When asked why, she said only, "If I'm here, I'll earn it." Even Colt's regulars, men with hands like leather and mouths full of tobacco, began to nod at her in quiet respect. But beneath it all, tension brewed. In his sleep, the crack of a rifle echoed, sudden and close. He saw the face of his younger brother Jeremiah, falling backward into snow. Colt woke in a sweat, always the same. He'd ridden as a Confederate scout in the mountains of Tennessee. Fast, brutal, and invisible. He came home in '65 to find his land scorched and his family dead from fever. Since then he hadn't picked a side in anything. Not war, not women, not God, until now. Little Eliza shivered under the blanket, her skin burning hot. Nora soaked cloths and whispered prayers, but her voice cracked with panic. Colt took one look and didn't hesitate. He threw on his oilskin, mounted his horse, and galloped into the rain. The storm had returned with a vengeance. Wind, like blades and mud, that pulled at hooves. The doctor lived 2 ridges over near Widow's Creek. Colt rode hard, spurred by something unfamiliar burning in his chest. But halfway there, the trail narrowed. A lantern flashed. 2 men blocked the road. Locals. Drunk. Mean. Thought. "You weren't the charity type, Reeves," one sneered, swinging a bottle. "Ain't your business if a widow's kid coughs." Colt dismounted slowly. "Step aside." The second man smirked, pulling a knife. "Maybe we cut her loose for you." A sudden twang cut through the air, an arrow embedded in the dirt between their boots. Both men jumped back, looking toward the trees. Standing in the shadows, barely visible in the storm, was a tall figure. A native hunter in a deerskin coat, face painted in faded war lines, bow still drawn. Neither man waited to ask questions. They fled into the brush. Colt stared across the rain. The figure nodded once, slow, deliberate, then vanished into the night. "You'd better hope she's strong," he muttered. Colt didn't answer. He just rode. By dawn, Eliza's fever had broken. She lay curled in her mother's lap, pale but breathing steady. Nora looked up as Colt entered, soaked to the bone, hat dripping in his hands. She didn't speak, but her hand brushed his sleeve as he knelt beside the child. Just for a moment. That night, while the rain eased, Tommy sat on the saloon floor, poking at a battered old harmonica he'd found behind the bar. "It don't work," he mumbled. Colt took it, turned it in his hand, and made a few adjustments with the edge of a fork. He handed it back. "Try now." Tommy blew gently. A warbled but sweet note filled the air. His eyes lit up. Colt smiled. Not much, just the corner of his mouth. "Thanks, mister," Tommy whispered. "Name's Colt," he replied. Laid on the stoop was a fresh rabbit, skinned and wrapped in cloth. He looked up. Greyhawk stood across the street, motionless, one hand on the bough slung across his shoulder. No words were exchanged, just a slow, respectful nod. Colt nodded back. Red Bluff still whispered, still judged. But the wind had shifted, and inside the saloon, 4 strangers who'd come with nothing now shared something more than shelter. They shared silence. They shared warmth. They shared survival. For the first time in years, Colt Reeves no longer felt like a ghost. He felt like a man again. Dust swirled in golden spirals as Tommy Whitfield clung to the saddle horn, his knuckles white, face pulled tight with concentration. "Loosen your knees," Colt said from a few feet away, arms folded, hat pulled low. "That horse ain't gonna buck unless you squeeze it like a vice." The boy nodded and adjusted his grip. The chestnut mare beneath him gave a soft snort but held steady. "Now, pull left." "Gentle," Tommy obeyed. The mare turned smoothly. His grin stretched wide. From the saloon porch, Nora watched, one hand shielding her eyes from the sun, the other rocking baby Amos asleep across her chest. Eliza sat beside her, humming to herself, weaving wild grass into tiny braids. Colt stepped forward, adjusting the target, a battered scarecrow set up against a barrel. "Take the shot," he said, handing Tommy a child-sized rifle. Tommy hesitated. "It's not loaded," Colt added, voice calm. "It's about aim, steadiness, control." The boy took a breath, aimed, and fired. Click. Colt nodded once. "Good, now again." Nora's gaze softened. For a brief moment, it felt like a life they might have had under different stars. That night, after the children slept, Colt poured 2 mugs of coffee and passed one to Nora. They sat in silence on 4. The back steps, the air filled with cicadas and distant coyote calls. "I never figured I'd be teaching a boy again," Colt said. "You're good at it," Nora replied. "I had a son once," he said, so quietly she almost didn't hear. Nora looked over, small blonde hair, died at 4. He stared into the darkness. Fever took him before the war ever could. She reached over, placed a hand gently on his. He didn't pull away. "I buried my husband last fall," she whispered. "We had nothing left but the land, and even that was drying up." Colt exhaled slowly. "We both lost more than we ever speak." Their hands stayed there, warm, still, but peace in Red Bluff never held for long. Reuben Carr, the self-styled mayor, stood tall with a belly, full of self-importance and a pocket lined with silver. He walked into Colt's saloon that week like he owned the place, cane tapping, eyes hard. "You've got folks talking," Carr said, glancing toward the back room. "This isn't a shelter. She doesn't belong." Colt didn't look up from polishing the bar. "Ain't your say who belongs here?" Carr snorted. "This town has standards, Colt. If you're too blind to see how it's dragging you down..." Colt's eyes met his. Cold. Steel. "You want to see blind? Keep pushing." Carr stepped back, smile tightening. "Fine. But don't come looking for help when trouble shows up." Trouble came the next morning. A man arrived on horseback. Sharp suit, shined boots, eyes like rusted nails. He introduced himself as Silas Beck, a land prospector with documents from Carson City and rumors of silver beneath the hills beyond Red Bluff. "I'm offering you good coin, Mr. Reeves," Beck said, placing a deed on the saloon table. "More than this. Hole in the wall is worth. I ain't selling," Colt replied without pause. Beck smirked. "Might be you don't get to choose." He tipped his hat and walked out. That night, Greyhawk returned. He didn't knock. He simply appeared in the doorway, moonlight casting his figure in long shadows. "Trouble rides east of town," he said. 5 men, one with a scar down the neck. Beck's kind. Colt nodded. "Thanks." Greyhawk looked toward the sleeping room where Nora's children rested. "They know how to hide?" "They'll learn." The fire came in the dark, just after midnight. Colt awoke to the smell, thick, oily, wrong. He bolted upright, grabbed his rifle, and flung the door wide. Flames licked the western wall. Smoke poured through the rafters. Nora screamed. Colt grabbed a bucket and doused Eliza's blanket, wrapping it around her. He tossed Tommy the harmonica, pointing to the back door. "Out the rear. Fast!" Nora cradled Amos, eyes wild with fear. Colt pulled her close. Greyhawk emerged through the smoke, soaked in river water, a hatchet in one hand. Together, the men broke the back windows, ushered the children through. A support beam cracked above them. Colt shoved Nora ahead, but the beam struck his shoulder, sending him to the floor with a cry. Greyhawk pulled him out, dragging him clear just as the roof collapsed. They huddled in the darkness behind the saloon. Nora clutched Amos, coughing. Eliza sobbed. Tommy stared in shock at the embers. Colt sat against a barrel, blood running down his arm, his shirt singed through. Nora rushed to him, ripping a strip from her skirt to press against the burn. Her hands trembled. "You fool," she whispered. "You could have died." He grinned through the pain. "Would have made the town happy." She stared at him. The firelight danced in her eyes. She leaned in, their faces inches apart. Then she stopped. A breath away. Her eyes searched his, and she pulled back. "I can't," she said softly. "Not yet." Colt nodded once. "Didn't expect you to." She helped him to his feet, arm over her shoulder. Behind them, the saloon burned. "Don't worry," Colt muttered, voice raspy but sure. "We're still standing. Fire didn't win." Smoke still rose from the ruins of the saloon, curling into the gray morning sky like the ghost of what once was. Colt Reeves stood at the edge of the rubble, his arm in a sling, his shirt torn and stained from the fire. Behind him, Nora tended to Eliza's singed hair, while Tommy quietly swept ash from a cracked plate. Baby Amos gurgled, wrapped in a borrowed quilt. Greyhawk approached in silence, handing Colt a stick of jerky without a word. They shared it by the embers. Neither man mentioned the smell of charred wood or the taste of regret in the air. "Beck won't wait long," Greyhawk finally said. Colt nodded. "Then neither will we." The saloon's frame had fallen, but the cellar still held barrels. Tools and rifles Colt had buried long ago. Weapons he'd hoped never to touch again. Tommy stood watching as Colt opened one dusty crate. Inside lay a long-barreled rifle, polished and clean beneath a wool cloth. Colt held it out. Tommy stared, wide-eyed. "I'm not ready." "It's not for shooting," Colt said. "It's for watching. Guard the back door. You see something, move that don't belong, and you yell, loud as you can. You guard like a man." The boy took the gun, holding it with trembling hands. Colt placed a hand on his shoulder. "I trust you." By dawn, the saloon's ruins had been turned into a fortress of sorts. Barrels stacked high, a makeshift barricade near the front, rifles loaded and placed carefully. 3 loyal patrons, old ranch hands Colt had once pulled from bar fights, returned to stand beside him, silent and armed. The wind shifted by midday. With it came the thundering of hooves. Silas Beck rode into town with 5 riders. All wore pistols, bandoliers glinting in the sun. Behind them, the townsfolk of Red Bluff peeked from windows, too afraid to speak, too ashamed to help. Beck dismounted in front of the saloon ruins, spitting on the scorched ground. "You gonna come out, Reeves, or am I burning what's left of your charity case and her brats?" Colt stepped out from the barricade, rifle in hand, hat low. "You've had your warning, Beck." Beck sneered. "You always were too sentimental. Should have sold me the land when you had the chance." Colt cocked the rifle, and hell broke loose. Beck's men spread out, firing from behind wagons and troughs. Colt returned fire, calm and practiced, hitting one square in the leg. Greyhawk took another from a rooftop, then winced as a bullet grazed his thigh. Inside, Nora gathered the children in the cellar, heart pounding as bullets shattered glass above her. Tommy stood near the back entrance, hands clenched around the rifle. "Not shooting," he whispered to himself, "just watching." Beck charged forward, revolver raised, only to meet Colt at the center of the street. They grappled, two men shaped by war and wilderness, as the others screamed and fired around them. A shot rang out, Beck's pistol, aimed at Eliza, who'd run from the cellar to call for her mother. Colt saw it. He turned, just in time. The bullet hit him in the side. He fell to one knee, gasping, blood soaking through his shirt. But he lifted his rifle one last time, and Beck fell. The silence that followed was staggering. Greyhawk limped toward Colt, covering him with his rifle. The last of Beck's men fled, horses kicking up dust. The townsfolk emerged slowly, their faces pale and ashamed. The preacher offered a prayer. The blacksmith offered water, but none could meet Colt's eyes. Nora ran to him, dropping to her knees, her hands pressed against the wound, voice cracking. "Stay with me, please." "I'm not done yet," Colt muttered. "Still got work to do." 3 days later, a carpenter arrived, not to rebuild a saloon, but a home. Colt sold half his land and the rocky half Beck had wanted, and used the money to raise a cabin with a wide porch, 2 chimneys, and a view of the sunset over the ridge. Greyhawk came once more. He stood at the door, offered Colt a small carved hawk, and then turned without a word. His limp had faded. Tommy now helped with the horses. Eliza drew flowers on the porch. Amos laughed in the morning light. One golden evening, Nora walked out carrying 2 cups of coffee. Colt sat on the steps, arm healing, the carved hawk resting beside him. She handed him the cup. "Thank you," she said softly. He looked up. "For what?" "For saving us," she replied. Tommy ran by, chasing Eliza, laughing, a wooden pistol in his belt. Then he paused, looked back, and shouted, "Pa! Look what I found!" Colt froze. The word hung in the air like music, like grace. Nora's eyes shimmered. "You saved us," she whispered. "But I think we saved you too."